Hey, folks, welcome back to the show. We have a great episode for you today. We're diving deep into strategies to help to reverse aging and age better and health span and lifespan and all those amazing things that we talk about here. But before I launch into that, I want to thank you guys for being here. I would like to encourage you, if you get value from this episode, not only to share it with your friends and family and networks, but also to leave us a review, because that is ultimately how we are able to get amazing guests for you guys. And also, another reminder that all of the links provided from our advertisers and sponsors are affiliate links. And it is through those affiliate links really that I am able to pay the bills. So if you're feeling inspired by something that we talk about here and decide to buy it, I would be grateful if you were willing to use the links that we provide. And because number one, almost always it will save you money. And number two is it provides revenue to float the podcast. So, and pay for the team. Okay, let's talk about today's guest. This episode, we dive deep into the captivating world of longevity and the science behind aging with none other than Dr. Sandra Kaufmann, a repeat guest to this podcast. Now, what's interesting about Dr. Kaufmann is that she is actually a pediatric anesthesiologist by trade, and a really good one at that. And so you might wonder, well, what does someone who specializes in pediatrics at a high level know about aging? And as it turns out, a lot. She's basically turned what started off maybe as a side hustle into 2 incredible books and a lot of really great projects coming down the pipes this year. So what we do in this episode is a deep dive into the heart of longevity science with Dr. Kaufmann. She discusses her groundbreaking Kaufmann protocol, a systematic approach to understanding and combating aging at a cellular level. And we explore key topics like the Sirtuin theory of aging and the role of NAD+ in maintaining cellular health. And we talk about some of the specific compounds that we can access to help move the needle on both these fronts. So Dr. Kaufmann's insights, drawn from her extensive research and publications, including the Kaufmann protocol, why we age and how to stop it, offers you, the listeners, a unique perspective on practical, scientifically backed strategies for a longer, healthier life. So join us for this enlightening journey into the future of aging science. Now, to learn more about Dr. Kaufmann and her work, and to be the first to know about her new clinic that she's planning for the spring of 2024, you're going to want to check out her website, which is kaufmannprotocol.com. Kaufmann is Kaufmann, protocol.com, or follow her on Instagram. She's got a great Instagram account, which is appropriately Kaufmann Anti-Aging is the Instagram handle. And don't forget that Kaufmann has 2 N's at the end. Everything else will be spelled in the show notes below. All right, now let's jump into the episode. Hey, folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome back to the show, Sandra Kaufmann, the doctor who does all the crazy things. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, it's so much fun to be back. You are awesome.
Oh, well, I feel the same way about you. So you've just come back from hiking the Grand Canyon on nothing, no training, no nothing, just scampered up and down. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies you used to make that happen. I'm sure my husband, who just dragged himself up and down Kilimanjaro, would be fascinated to hear. But I actually sent him to a gym called Altitude in Toronto, where they have the ability in the workout room to drop the concentration of oxygen to simulate high altitude training. I think it helped them.
No, I'm sure it did. And 3 years ago, right before COVID hit, I was climbing Aconcagua up to 21,000 feet, and I had an altitude trainer. Yeah. And I'm going to Ecuador to climb 18,000 foot peaks in January, so I have an altitude trainer that I'm working with now. So it's really, really helpful. The whole Grand Canyon thing was just sort of to start getting my legs back.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that of the 4 guys that he went with, he was the one that held it together on the O2 sat part. one guy apparently decided about 1,000 feet from the top that he would just lie down and have a nap now. So apparently that did not go over well with the Sherpas. Decided going to take you up, and then nobody's going to spend too much time here, and we're going back down again. So anyway, be that as it may, adventures aside, talking to you is always such a gas, because I always know that there's about, 500 different wormholes you've dove into since the last time we talked. So we talked a little bit before the podcast, and we finally settled on Sirtuins, your Sirtuin deep dive. And then we're going to do some NAD at the end too, just as a topper, because NAD is so interesting and was part of your short-term strategy for helping you get your legs back for the Grand Canyon. So maybe let's start by Sirtuins. Why are they? What are they? Why should we? Why are they? But what are they?
I really have no idea how they got to be what they are. That's not completely
important.
Well, they're evolutionarily conserved from the earliest of little cells. So we've had them for a very, very, very long time.
That's generally a good sign.
Right? And we mammals, of course, have more than anybody else. Actually, that's not true. But we have 7 Sirtuins. Mm-hmm. And what are they? So they are histone deacetylases in general. And it turns out that they're more than that, but that's sort of like the basic definition, and more specifically class 3 histone deacetylases.
And so just for those,
what does that mean? Right?
Yeah. What the heck does that mean?
What does that mean?
Tell us what that means in like English. Why does that matter?
All right. So genes create proteins and enzymes have to get turned on and off. And all of these things are controlled by the addition or subtraction of various agents that are hanging on, right? So if you just look at histones, you can look at methyl groups that are glued on, or acetyl groups that are glued on, or phosphorylating groups, or there's 1,000 of things that can be added onto a histone. Mm-hmm. Acetylases are kind of key. And if you take an acetyl group off of a histone, it allows for that piece of DNA to sort of unwind, and it grants access to the ability of the little translational proteins to come in, make the RNA, and then make the protein.
Perfect.
So by sort of like the on-off switch of certain enzymes, enzyme production.
Yeah. Yeah.
That also works for enzymes in addition to histones, but essentially they're on-off switches. And for the most of the part, they're on switches. Occasionally they're off switches.
These are the SIRT1s now, or is that the histones?
All of the Sirtuins. So
all the Sirtuins.
Sirtuins, and the different Sirtuins, as I said, there are 7, have slightly different aspects to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's a couple of standouts, right?
There are absolutely standouts. So Sirtuin 1, and 1 always means in the chemical world that we know most about it, right? When you discover something, you go, aha, this is number 1. It's like 1.0. And it, for the most part, controls all cellular homeostasis. So everything from DNA repair mechanisms to oxidation levels to circadian rhythms to, it interacts with your AMP kinase, so caloric restriction issues, what's made, what's not made. I mean, it controls literally all homeostasis. And Sirtuin 1 lives in your nucleus, and this is sort of how it sort of controls everything. Mm-hmm. 2 sort of flits around the cell, and we don't know that much about it. 3, 4, and 5 live in your mitochondria. And 3 is the master regulator of your mitochondria. So people go to a huge degree to sort of optimize their mitochondria in terms of increasing mitochondrial biogenesis. And, that's a whole nother lost topic, and we get into if you want to. Mm-hmm. But without activating Sirtuin 3, nothing happens, because it controls your all of your mitochondrial homeostasis, as well as having interactions sort of with the nucleus. So 3 is insanely important. Yes, and there's absolutely
nice to 3.
Yeah, there's evidence that by the time you're 35, levels of SIRT3 start dropping.
Wow.
And by the time you're 40, they're very dropping. Yeah. And it's demonstrated in many, many species that if you increase levels of SIRT3, you're just going to do better and have better life extension. So that's kind of crucial.
So we're going to talk about those strategies, but first we have to talk about 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Right. So 1 is in the nucleus, 2 flits around the cell, 3, 4, and 5 are in the nucleus, and then 6 and 7 live in your nucleus, but more specifically within your chromatin. and they are linked to DNA repair mechanisms and control of your heterochromatin versus your euchromatin. I know you're like, what the heck is that? Okay, so your nucleus, everyone, it's the big brain of the operations, and all of your DNA is in there looking a bit like spaghetti. And there's areas that are clustered more tightly, and then there's areas that are more loose, right? And if you think about ease of acquisition, the loose stuff is where proteins can get in and translate and make proteins out of that area, right?
Right.
So that's considered your real chromatin because it's busy. So real means EU in scientific jargon. So euchromatin is what we're actually using, right? The compacted stuff is heterochromatin, and it's really contains a lot of things that we don't really need all the time. So it's sort of safely tucked away. And it has a lot of dangerous aspects to it too. It has a lot of transposons in there and some things that can activate cancer. So you want your heterochromatin tightly packed, and your euchromatin sort of available, and then it sort of gets glued on the nuclear envelope, blah, 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 blah. But all of that is controlled by, most of that is controlled by Sirtuins 6 and 7, 6 being the standout.
Cool. Okay. So SIRT6, SIRT3, SIRT1, those are going to be kind of our areas of focus. I actually remember a book years ago now, and I don't know if I still have it. It was this little book, and it was called The Sirtuin Diet. And it was written by these two guys who, and from the best as I can tell, it was a book that, it was an interesting little book, and it was very focused on that whole concept of eating lots of very colorful fruits and vegetables because they all had different capacities to activate different sirtuins. And so, like we don't have enough to think about when we put food in our mouth. Now we have to think about, oh, this is really good for my SIRT1. I think I've overfed my SIRT6 today. So
right. So most people that know me well know that I'm sort of a renowned junk food junkie, but I take 70 pills a day, and I take very specific Sirtuin activators.
Okay.
Because it's doable. Obviously, the most famous ones are resveratrol and pterostilbene.
Yeah.
And they do activate more than just SIRT1. They do many other things as well because they're polyphenols. Resveratrol comes, of course, from red wine. Pterostilbene comes from blueberries. People always ask, oh, can I just eat blueberries? And I think I calculated it out to be like 2 gallons of blueberries a day or something outrageous. I don't remember exactly, but like you just can't consume that much to make it actually work, right?
Nor can you drink enough wine without becoming a raging alcoholic and have.
Right. And I know people have tried.
Listen, they still do. They still do. This is a ongoing experiment, but somehow it doesn't work that way.
And there's a couple other things that are Sirtuin 1 activators. There's Paraflora is a pretty good one, sort of underutilized. I like it a lot because it's dirt cheap and it's sort of semi-exotic. It's just kind of fun.
Paraflora, okay.
Paraflora. But the other thing that people have to keep in mind that for all of the Sirtuins is that they are NAD dependent. So to explain why that, some books just say, oh, it's a cofactor. Why is it? And it turns out that what happens is Sirtuins lift it's a deacetylase. So they're taking the acetyl group off of something. Well, what do you do with a random acetyl group? You got to glue it to something else. So they glue it onto the NAD molecule.
Huh. Cool.
So if NAD is not floating around, it just goes screw it and puts it back to where it started. So it just doesn't work.
Right. So you're no further ahead. That's really interesting. So before we jump too far ahead, can we talk a little bit about the bioavailability that a lot of people argue about, is it even worth it to take resveratrol? And is pterostilbene truly resveratrol kind of more bioavailable twin? Like, what are your thoughts on, and obviously they're a little bit different. They come from different places, but they're both from the dark blue kind of spectrum.
Yeah. Right. So I consider them sort of molecular cousins. They are very, very close. And if you just look at the molecules themselves, pterostilbene is more bioavailable than resveratrol. It just is. It just is.
Yeah.
However, caveats are that there was a study that came out a year or two ago, maybe longer than I lose track of time, that if you have any lipid issues, like, dyslipidemias, pterostilbene could potentially make that worse. right?
Oh, interesting.
So you go, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have that one. But then there's the whole world of resveratrol, and there's the ever escalating war of increasing bioavailability, right?
Mm-hmm.
What can you wrap around the molecule or hide it with or compare it with, whatever, to increase its bioavailability? And I love this war because it means that we all win. Right.
Sooner or later, somebody comes up with some really good ideas.
Right. People are damn smart and they're determined. Yeah. And it's, we live in a capitalistic society and you're like, good for us. We get to win. So there are more bioavailable products out of resveratrol than out of pterostilbene at this moment. So a bioavailable resveratrol is going to beat a non or less bioavailable pterostilbene.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. So what should people be looking for when they're looking for a supplement with resveratrol that makes it bioavailable?
So frequently they can be in a nanomycel, they can be liposomal. Usually the people that go out of their way to do this will put it on the label, like bioavailable via such and such mechanism.
Right.
Like I love Rev Genetics because they always put it on the bottle. Like their metacurcumin is one of my favorite things to take. And I don't rep for anybody, so I don't get paid, but their product is literally called 277X. And the reason it's because it's 277 times more bioavailable than standard curcumin. And you go, well, that seems like a no-brainer, right? Because they put it in, special molecular packaging.
What's the name of the company?
Rev Genetics.
REV Genetics?
Yeah. And again, I don't get paid to rep. I get that.
I
use a lot of their products. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's their 277X curcumin.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look it up, there's a little chart and they're so proud of their bioavailability stats that they just go to the end of the earth to explain this to you. And their resveratrol is in this liquidy gel stuff that's supposed to increase the bioavailability. What is it really? Hard to say. But it is what it is, right? And it also they'll tell you how many times more bioavailability each of them of their sort of things are.
Okay, that's really interesting. What are your thoughts on? I know this is a little bit of and especially in the curcumin world, this can be a little bit again of a lightning rod. Is the idea of curcumin is only made bioavailable by combining it with black pepper, which is which people say poke holes in your gut, it's horrible, and then
old science. So old science, it's 15, 20-year-old technology. What the pepper did is it decreased the liver enzymes so that you wouldn't metabolize the curcumin as quickly.
Okay.
Right? So the problem with that by logic is not metabolizing other things as quickly either. Yeah. So your liver has several different mechanisms by which you metabolize drugs, foods, any chemicals, right?
Yeah.
And it just blocks the system temporarily, of course.
Like your phase 2 detox pathways, kind of?
To be perfectly honest, detox pathway. I don't believe in
not detox. I don't mean that. I mean like the glucuronidation, acetylation, all the.
Right. It's like CYP something. I used to know this in anesthesia residency, and I don't remember it now. But it's the same pathway. So theoretically, it comes with a lot of warnings as well, because if you take this, you're also blocking metabolism of certain drug types that have the same metabolic pathway. But that is very old technology. I would never recommend that these days.
No. So are you feeling that the black pepper is a bad idea? Well, yeah, because of this reason. Because, I just asked the dumbest question ever on my own podcast. Sorry, guys. Sometimes it's a day. This is one of those days. I can get them to cut that out. Okay, so we've taken care of bioavailability of resveratrol and pterostilbene to activate our SIRT1 gene, which we want to do because it is just super valuable. It's in the nucleus of the cell and it really targets cellular homeostasis. So let's carry on and now talk about SIRT3, because SIRT3 is also super important. We are now dancing in the mitochondria, and everybody's crazy about mitochondria, really.
Yes, we are, because without them, you would be nothing.
Pretty much.
Right. So mitochondria fail for many, many, many reasons. The top reason, in my opinion, and you're going to get a million opinions from a million different people, right? You can argue free radical production. You could argue permeability, pore issues, this, that, and the other. But in general, if SIRT2 and 3 fails, all mitochondrial homeostasis fails. Right. So how do we upregulate SIRT2 and 3? Right. Yeah. Best two agents out there are hinokiol. Hinokiol comes from the magnolia plant.
Yeah. I'm finding this in a lot of sleep formulas right now.
Which does not make a ton of sense because it's increasing your mitochondria.
Yeah, interesting. But we're finding it in there's actually 2 sleep formulas I can think of right now that have hinokiol in them.
Oh, well.
Interesting. Anyway, so SIRT3, yes.
Well, so the other interesting thing is sirtuins. All of the sirtuins have to do with boosting circadian rhythms as well.
Okay. Well, maybe that's why then. Yeah.
So if you are not sleeping as you get older, you boost your sirtuins. 1 is probably a little stronger than 3 in terms of sleep. And then if you're NAD deficient, none of it works. So if you boost sirtuins and NAD, it's one of the big reasons or one of the big ways you can sort of return back to sleep. And then there's a whole nother topic because sleep has to do, or circadian rhythms have to do with protein production all over your cells. A lot of it has to do with DNA repair mechanisms, blah, 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 blah. And of course, if you don't sleep, increased risk of cancer, blah, 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 blah. Where were we? Yeah, hinokiol. Quite sorry.
Hinokiol.
Down the wormhole I go, right?
Yeah, I know. Down the wormhole you go, and here I am finding a side hole to go into.
Let's see. So hinokiol comes from magnolia. My personal absolute favorite SIRT2 and 3 activator has to be dihydromyricidin. People are like, how do you spell that? It's dihydro, myristin. So it's very
rice tin.
My rice tin. Like if you like went to a Chinese restaurant, this is my rice tin.
Brilliant. That is such a good way to explain MY. That's amazing. Okay, good. Got it.
The way my brain works is really dumb. Like my rice tin.
Totally, believe me, I can follow. This is good. So dihydro, my rice tin. Also, I now remember the name. I will never forget it.
So the cool thing about this, and I love this, if you Google dihydromyricidin, it shows up as a cure for hangovers.
That's where I've heard of it before. Okay.
Yes. Why do you get hangovers, right? Alcohol kills the mitochondria in your liver.
Oh, does it now?
Right. And so when the mitochondria in your liver sort of gets suppressed, you can't process alcohol as quickly. It sort of lingers and it's very toxic. So you have a hangover on top of like osmotic diuresis and all that kind of garbage. Right. But if you boost the mitochondria, right, especially in your liver, but then it's going to boost them everywhere.
Yeah.
You process alcohol faster and you have less of a hangover.
Wow, that's so interesting. It also probably explains why people lose their tolerance for alcohol as they get older, right? As you lose your mitochondria, they might not be as efficient.
I would imagine that's probably true.
It might be part of the mechanism that, some of us never tolerated alcohol at the best of times, but maybe just because I don't have any dihydromyricidin. Yes.
My rice tin. Yes.
Well, I was going to say my rice tin, but then I wanted to say it properly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But so what's really interesting is, so I Googled this trying to find the best brand, right? And 7 different hangover cures popped up. And then that Google is always listening, right?
Uh-huh.
So then I started getting stuff from like Alcoholics Anonymous.
I love it.
So it's, like warning flag. If you want to boost your mitochondria, be prepared. You're going to be an alcoholic.
You're suddenly going to be branded an alcoholic by Google. So where do people get dihydromyricidin?
It's everywhere. There are a billion like brands out there. It's really, really interesting.
So do you just use one of these hangover helpers or can you
I just do it. So what's interesting is, so if you read the ingredients, it'll usually be dihydromyricidin, some other pseudo garbage, right? So you can either take the pseudo garbage depending on what it is, or you can go straight to the dihydromyricidin, which is what I generally do because I don't like the extra garbage thrown in there. And it's usually, I think it's like 300 milligrams a day or something. And again, some people are like, oh, do I only take it when I'm drinking? And the answer is, well, if you're an alcoholic, that would be helpful. But in terms of longevity, which is what this is about,
would be good. Yeah,
every day would be very helpful.
Okay. So would it make sense for someone to, who someday decide, okay, I'm going to make a SIRT1, SIRT3
combo pill,
and just
so
resveratrol and
let me save you so I'm working on my own set right now, right?
Yeah.
And I'm doing that as well as throwing in SIRT6 activators.
I can only imagine that you are, of course. So this will be your one-stop SIRT support.
Yes, that's the plan. That's
Perfect.
The plan.
All right, let's, are there foods that you can use for SIRT1 and SIRT3? I know it's gallons and pounds and buckets of food.
I suppose you could eat a magnolia tree. I'm not really sure if that's tasty.
Hey, that's not a thing, actually.
I think it comes from the bark, actually. So it must be some sort of, I don't know. So dihydroamyrisodin comes from Chinese vine tea. And I know you can order Chinese vine tea. I never have because I'm not a tea drinker. So I have no idea what it tastes like, but I know that it's available as a tea.
Yeah, if you ever had a TCM, if you've ever worked with a traditional Chinese medicine doctor and they give you those teas that you're supposed to drink after you have your big acupuncture session. Now, I will say they're amazing and everything they do works, but the teas are brutal.
Yeah, right. So, right. Yeah, they taste terrible, right? So I personally would rather swallow 1 million pills than have a cup of terrible tea.
Yeah, no, listen, because eventually I get tired, right? Yeah.
A little capsule, you can't taste a thing, you swig it down, you are good to go.
Right? I know. Yeah. I totally
I don't know why people want to open them and put them in smoothies. I get that question all the time. Can't I just dump it in a smoothie? That stuff tastes terrible. Why the hell would you ever want to do that?
Yeah, I keep saying I'm the same way, because there was this one supplement recently. I'm like, it's a great supplement and it's vile. I'm like, they're finally I think it was a point of honor. The guy who'd come up with it didn't want to encapsulate it. It's like, no, if people want this stuff, they're going to have to drink it. And they said to me, just put it in your smoothie. And I was like, but then my smoothie will taste like terrible. Why would then I have to drink a lot of it? Like at some point, if I have to drink it, give me a shot and down the hatch. And it's like, if I'm going to take methylene blue or something, but yeah. But to put it in my whole giant, beautiful, creamy smoothie, why would I do that?
Why would you ruin the smoothie, right? It's terrible.
That's my point. Exactly. So, all right, SIRT6, and then I'm going to pop quiz you on methylene blue. I'm curious on your opinion on methylene blue.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so SIRT6, there are a couple sort of ones, like cyanidin is helpful. I tried that for a little while, but the big one is fucodan.
Okay.
And this is an interesting one because it comes from Japanese seaweed.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because when you go to buy fucodan, it can be dirt cheap or it can be horrifically expensive. I mean, there's a bottle out there that's like $1,000 a bottle. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening. Versus like pennies. And you think that doesn't probably seem as all that great either. So I keep importing all of these Japanese types of fucodan to see if I can find the happy medium. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting, and I have ended up importing a lot of stuff from Japan recently. And instead of our capsules, they squish it all into a tablet.
Really?
Really interesting.
The actual seaweed.
I don't know. It's just tiny little tablets. It's just different packaging from different countries. So I just keep popping fucodan tablets.
Okay. Is fucodan the brown seaweed?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Because in it. It's not it. Seaweed has a lot of stuff in it, but it's in it.
Because I remember learning in school that there was a brown seaweed or some brown seaweed supplement that was actually also really good for any kind of radiation exposure, like after x-rays or.
So that's actually, Aclonia cava is actually, that's the one that's advertised for that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But a lot of these very sort of similar makeups,
Okay. So
seaweed is a very underutilized resource.
Although, did you read, there was a study recently that I read a paper not that long ago talking about how, everybody's always expounding the virtues of eating seaweed and how good it is for you and blah, blah, blah. And they were saying that, unfortunately, most of us don't have the microbiome that required to break down and extract all these nutrients from the seaweed. But people in Japan who have been eating this seaweed for generations, they have that microbiome. So
yeah, no, that's probably, right. Evolution has its wonders. Yeah. Which is why you take your little imported Japanese tablets and you're done with it. right?
Exactly. Don't be gnawing on seaweed. It's not going to help. Okay. So the fucoidan obviously is going to be part of your SIRT soup.
Yes.
And until then, if we're going to try and source it, at least go middle of the road. Don't.
I think so. I can't imagine.
I can't get my head around the pennies one. It doesn't make sense to me.
It just seems like whatever they're doing is not going to be quality enough for you to actually benefit from it. On the other hand, $1,000 a bottle seems a bit ridiculous as well. God knows what they're doing to it. Maybe they're like, I don't know. Is there seaweed in like a special gold-laden bath? I have no blooming idea, but it seemed a little excessive. So again, I went middle of the road. I chose 3 random middle of the road Japanese brands that, to be perfectly honest, I can't read the bottles. They showed up, right? I'm like, oh my God, because it takes a while to get here. And so a month later, you get these packages and you're like, what the hell did I order, right? So then you do the little Google scan thing on the bottle that translates, oh yes, this is my Fucoidan. Got it.
That is hilarious. Now, so obviously, are you going to be testing
So there's no SIRT6 or SIRT3 test right now.
No, that's not what I mean. I actually meant for the seaweed. Do you have it tested for heavy metals or any?
It's not seaweed. I mean, it's Fucoidan tablets.
Okay. Oh, so it's not necessarily extracted.
It's extracted Fucoidan. That's it. It's compressed into a tablet.
Okay. All right. So we don't have to worry about these things.
Think.
Perfect.
For Google Translate.
You're going to need a Japanese person on your team at some point.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to need some from everywhere because I honestly use stuff from all over the globe.
Yeah.
It's for various reasons, I've gotten thrown out of global entry. This is actually quite funny because I
can't wait to hear why.
I import so much stuff, and I used to import like eye drops from Russia, and I get a ton of stuff from Japan and China and Argentina and South Korea that I must have gotten on some sort of watch list, right?
Oh my God.
So then I also import South Korean Botox. Why? Because it's the same molecule as Allergan, and it's a fraction of the cost. And I actually think it's better, right? Because South Korea, there's famous for their beauty supplies. I mean, this stuff's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So somehow the US Customs got a hold of one of my boxes of Botox and they took it. And this box arrived here at my home, completely ripped to shreds and like nothing. I mean, it was just a cardboard box with shreds in it. I'm like, what the hell? So I called the company and they're like, well, we sent it to you intact. And then 3 weeks later, I got this huge stack of papers from customs threatening me with blah, 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 blah. I said, you're illegally importing. I'm like, I don't think I'm legally doing anything, but called my sister, my official attorney. She's like, what's more important? Like losing the Botox or having a fight with US Customs? I said, it's done anyway, right? It's dead. Once it's not cold, it's not good. So I just dropped the whole thing. And then I was flying back from Europe, like, a month later, and I go to global entry and they just nixed me. And they wouldn't tell me why. They're like, you've been disqualified. I'm like, but what? So I looked it up online and then I realized that US Customs and global entry was the same thing.
Oh.
And then I called my sister, the attorney. I'm like, she's like, well, what's more important? Getting back into the States a little bit earlier or having South Korean Botox? And I'm like, well, duh, Botox. So I lost all global entry capacity.
So you're in the cheap seats. You're waiting at the back of the line like everybody else.
Oh yeah, I've lost privilege, but I have no wrinkles, and that's what's important.
Listen, that's all that really matters. At the end of the day, this is about priorities, people.
Right? Your listeners gonna be like, man, she's nuts.
No, it's you. It's Dr. Sandy Kaufmann. If you can't take the heat, you're just going to have to get out of the water. All right. So cool. So we have SIRT1, SIRT3, SIRT6. We know why they're super important. We understand 3 of the major compounds that are required to keep them happy, which we really need. We will listen up and keep our ear to the ground for whenever you come up with your super SIRT soup supplement. Ooh, that's for us.
So the other interesting thing I'm experimenting with is the IV equivalents of some of these things.
Oh.
So I have my hands on IV resveratrol at the moment. And I'm beginning to think that, much like IV NAD, I mean, you don't want too much at one time, but perhaps when you're, if you walk into the clinic that I will be opening hopefully in March, if you haven't had any SIRT1 activation in years and years and years, certainly possible that an IV infusion would be helpful to jumpstart the process, and then you start on some sort of oral supplementation thereafter. So I'm working on these things, lots of sort of things in process.
That is super cool. Where's your clinic going to be? That's very exciting.
So I live in Miami. It'll be in South Miami.
Nice. I go there a lot. That is excellent. Excited to hear this.
Sign you up.
Okay, so yeah, hook me up. So so then you just get that's amazing. So you get your boost from the IV, and then you just keep everything happy with oral supplementation.
In fact, I'm working on so what I give to most people over the age of 40 to start is what I call the panacea. And it's a combination of 5 agents that everyone just needs, without question. And if I can convert all of that to an IV, I can get everyone started immediately and then convert them. So it's not just the resveratrol, it would be free radical scavenging and transglycosylation, and all of those things you sort of need in like a one shot, okay, here we go, let's get moving sort of maneuver.
Perfect. Okay, I love that. All right, so we'll keep our ears open for that. And probably this podcast will most likely come out in February sometime. So by the time this comes out, I'll get in touch with you. Great. Maybe we'll be able to update people on the status of the clinic. Okay, so the other topic we were going to cover today was NAD, because it's one of those ones that people love to argue about. Just love it. I did 5 days of NAD IV last May. And if I tell the wrong person, if I tell the right person, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. How did you feel? How did it go? And then if I tell other people, they're kind of slightly horrified for me. And they're like, why would you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I thought it was really smart. It's like cellular energy. Why wouldn't I? Do you want to maybe speak to the controversy a little bit?
So I think that I tend to be a moderate.
Yeah.
Much like
5 days of NAD IV might have been too much as far as you're concerned.
It was a little bit much. My big take home message for most people is cellular homeostasis. Right? Yeah. And there's absolute proof that as you get older, you have less available NAD.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure your listeners know this, but very, very quickly, what does NAD do, right? So it is part of the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. So without it, you don't make energy, but there's no evidence that if you have more, you have an excessive amount of energy. Like it's not
right.
Right.
Yeah. So that you can only go to a certain level. You can't overfill the tank. Okay.
Exactly. So that's one. 2, it is the necessary cofactors we talked about for all of your sirtuins. Right. So when you are deficient, your sirtuins do not work and you lose cellular homeostasis. Okay. But it's not the rate limiting factor generally. I mean, sometimes it can be, granted, if it's very deficient. But if you have enough, you don't necessarily need more.
Right.
Thirdly, you use it to repair your DNA. So there's single-stranded DNA, there's double-stranded DNA problems, right? So single-stranded gets repaired by 2 systems. There's NUR and BUR, which is nucleotide versus base excision. And then there's the double-stranded, which is either gets repaired via homogeneous or non-homogeneous repair mechanisms. But the single-stranded errors get repaired via a whole system of little mechanisms, but they fill in the gaps, right? They take out the piece that's damaged, and they fill in the backbone of the DNA with disassembled NAD.
Huh. That's interesting. Okay.
So if you are NAD deficient, you're not fixing your DNA. Right?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that is if you have too much, you're not fixing it any faster.
So it's more wasteful. It's not so much harmful as it is.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We're not finished.
and lastly, it's a communication device. The balance between NAD, NADH, and then all of the feedback loops. It's a balance that tells your nucleus how much energy you have and what to do.
Okay.
Right. So the question is going beyond some reasonable level, is that useful or is it harmful? right? And that's where the argument lies. No one is arguing that you should be deficient.
Right.
Is it helpful or harmful to be higher levels? My argument is that it probably would be harmful to have super high levels because it's going to throw all of your homeostasis into disarray. Right? And if you think about your blood levels on a graph, right? If you're here and then you do like an IV and you woo, and then you're back down and you're flat, what did you just do to your cellular system? The answer is really no. Versus you take oral supplementation and you sort of come at some homeostasis and then you stay there, right? And that's sort of what you want. You want cellular homeostasis. So if you are 70, 80, whatever, and you are horribly deficient in NAD, then some sort of bolus system, IV, patch, IM, something like that, might be extremely useful. But if you're a reasonably normal human being and you're not horrifically deficient, you don't really need a big IV, right? Okay. Is one IV reasonable? Probably. I would argue that 5 is probably a little bit much because I could probably also argue that you are on NAD supplementation or precursor supplementation anyway, right? So when you did 5 days, you're like way super therapeutic. And what is it that doing to your homeostasis? And the answer is, I don't really know.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a hormetic stressor.
We hope so, right? But we don't know because
But we don't know. Yeah. So we don't want to do this
levels and are you doing feedback loops and blah, 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 blah. So I'm not saying the therapy is bad. I'm saying it's person dependent, situation dependent, with a variety of very important variables. Totally makes sense.
Okay. So now we know about NAD. Now, let's talk about the precursors. There's NR, NMN. Do you have a favorite in there?
I don't. I think that they are all very closely related. One is one enzymatic step different than the other, which is not a rate limiting step. So in essence, it doesn't really matter. People love to argue whether or not it's actually intracellular versus extracellular, right? And of course, there's pumps involved. There's a whole lot of issues going on in terms of that. Can you actually measure your intracellular levels? That would be a bitch, right? You're not going to take one cell, stick a little tiny needle into it, and go, shit, I missed, right?
In there. Yeah, exactly.
So theoretically, if your blood levels are a reasonable amount, homeostasis is going to drive in whatever the cells require.
Okay. So it doesn't matter really. NR.
I don't think so. Honestly, I use whatever's on sale. All right.
I've heard you say that before. I love that actually.
I know, which is about you. So you're going to kill me for just a second because my computer's about to die and I need to plug it in.
Okay. I'm just going to pause. Okay. So we've done our SIRT 1, 3, and 6 we know are the big focus. We've talked some about NAD. Now, this is my favorite part of talking to Sandra Kaufmann, and that is talk to us about the strange new things that have come across your radar lately, because there's always something. If you guys aren't watching this, she's rubbing her hands together. She's all in. Here we go.
So most people, when they're bored, watch Netflix, and I cruise Google Scholar for just random ass cool things, right? It's like a treasure trove in there if you just have to find the right pieces and parts. So yeah. So one of my new things that I found is a Japanese drug called Cellbex, Selbex. It's the brand name, and it stands for a name that's like ungodly long, starts with a G, and I don't remember what it is offhand, but Cellbex is the brand name. And so what is Cellbex? This is fantastic. Cellbex was proved by the Japanese FDA 20 years ago for gastritis, right? So inflammation of the gut from taking too many other drugs, which I find moderately funny because I take a lot of drugs. I'm like, well, that's useful. But what it actually is, it's a very potent heat shock protein activator.
Really?
Yes.
That's so interesting.
Yes, it is.
Couldn't people just go sit in a sauna for a
while? So in order to activate your heat shock proteins, you have to be in a sauna for a very specific amount of time. It's like over a half an hour, I think, at a very high temperature. And you have to do it every day.
Yeah,
right?
Not going to happen.
Or you could take Cellbex, right? Why not?
No,
and
they're
it
not.
decreases your risk of gastritis, right? Which is another reason that I import all this crazy stuff and
And no longer have global entry.
no longer have global entry. So people are like, I don't know who your listeners are exactly. Why would we activate our heat shock proteins, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the world of protein homeostasis, otherwise known as proteostasis, proteins are very particular in terms of their three-dimensional shape, right? We talk about primary organization is like the list of amino acids that forms a secondary shape, and then the tertiary shape is like this three-dimensional glob, and you look at it and you're like, oh, what the hell is that? But it's very, very, very specific. Mm-hmm. And it gets unwound based on stresses, pH, salinity, this, that, the other. Gets glycated, it gets this, it gets that. Like proteins take a beating.
Yeah.
And so for every important protein, it has a chaperone protein that literally follows it around from the moment it's born to the morning to the day that it sort of like disappears into the garbage dump.
Okay.
I like to think of them as just very exotic babysitters, right? So in fact, you have these chaperones in your regular cell, in the cytosol. You even have them in your mitochondria. There are mitochondrial chaperones. So for example, 99% of the proteins in your mitochondria are coded for in your nucleus, right?
Wow.
So the nucleus codes for a protein, goes through your RER, gets associated with a chaperone that keeps it in a very specific shape, but then it has to be unwound to get through the membrane of the mitochondria. Right. Then the guard dogs, I call them Tim and Sam, which stand for such and such monitors, membranes, whatever. And then it gets passed off to a mitochondrial chaperone that reconfigures it and then takes it to its location so that it does something.
That's so crazy.
It is amazing.
How amazing is that? Right. I mean, I don't know, you guys, that this is where the nerd totally comes out in me. Like I sit here and I go, that is like redonkulously well organized, orchestrated. Like that's nuts.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's insane. And when you see a diagram of this, and it's funny. So there's lots of different classes of heat shock proteins or chaperones, and it's done by molecular weight. So there's it'll be like a 90 and a 70 and a 40 and a 30. And they do various things around the cell. But of course, as you get older, they don't do it as well. Right.
Okay, which is why you get that one of the hallmarks of aging is proteostasis. It's loss of, and so the heat shock proteins are the chaperone proteins.
Yes, right. Okay. So if you think about your cell as a smart defensive thing, right? What melts proteins or what makes things cause them to sort of like fall apart? Physiologic stress, right? Mm-hmm. Heat, cold, salinity, all of these things make this molecule change shape. Yeah. Right. So if you add stress to it, it goes, aha, I need to fix this. It upregulates its chaperones that puts it back into shape. Huh. Right. Sort of like all of these glorious feedback loops. Well, you can cheat the system, right? If you upregulate your heat shock proteins, you're increasing your proteal stability, right? Yeah. And the key thing about that is most neurologic diseases, not all of it, but most neurologic diseases, some aspect is failure of protein folding. They're called proteinopathies.
Really? So
right, Alzheimer's, it has the tau or the what are they
tau
called?
Proteins?
Tau proteins, and there's the other sheets.
The amyloid plaques.
Yeah, exactly. I'm losing my brain. But most of the neurologic diseases are all proteinopathies, and therefore, by upregulating your chaperones, you're reducing relative risk of getting a neurologic disease. And I'm not saying you're not going to. I'm not saying like all risk goes away.
No, well, you're solving that. You're
relative
helping with that.
Risk, yeah. Right. Relative risk decreases. So isn't that the coolest thing in the world? You get to decrease your gastritis and decrease relative risk of neurologic disease and help all of your proteins. I'm like, that's a winner.
Wow. And just this Cellbex, which is an over-the-counter drug?
Yeah. You just order. So yeah, you type Cellbex into Google and you get 17 Japanese pharmacies that are happy to send it to you.
You're kidding. But of course, everything's going to be written in writing. So you need that Google app that's going to translate the package so that you can tell your Fucoidan from your Cellbex.
Yes.
When you get it. All right, we're on it. So this is kind of like one of those, you get different compounds that are like, oh, these are caloric restriction mimetics or exercise mimetics. This is a gastritis mimetic, which actually protects your proteins, your heat shock proteins.
Well, it's not a gastritis mimetic.
No, it's a heat shock protein.
Heat shock protein mimetic.
Yeah. All right.
Upregulator.
Who even knew that there was such a thing?
I had no idea. I found it. And I was jumping up and down in my kitchen. I'm like, oh my God. How do people not know this, right?
Life with Dr. Kaufmann. When you find her jumping up and down in her kitchen, it's not that she's won the lottery, it's that she's found another really cool thing on Google Scholar.
It's true. It is. It's embarrassing, but it's damn straight. It's true.
All right. Well, we respect that and we honor that and we all benefit from it. Okay. I think we have time for one more cool thing. So.
Okay. One more cool thing. Do you want lithium or do you want exosomes?
Kind of want both. Okay, let's start with, I feel like exosomes is a deeper dive. Do we have time for exosomes or should we do lithium?
I don't know. We could do whatever you want.
Okay, well, I can't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Let's talk about exosomes.
Lithium. Let's go with lithium.
Okay, lithium. All right, lithium first. We're going to get both in.
We'll see. So I was on this hunt for things that helps your telomeres and your mitochondria, right?
We want to do that.
Right. So it turns out, so if you have bipolar or you are a manic depressant, right, your telomeres by definition are significantly shorter than a normal person's.
Interesting. All of them? Really?
All of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, telomeres it's such a hard thing to specify because people point to a number, which we know is bullshit, right? Because every chromosome has 4 ends.
So how do you ever? Yeah.
It's a law of averages, right? You have, I think it was 184 telomeres per cell, right? And then of course your liver is going to be different than your heart, which is different than your kidney, which is different. And so they're all different, right? But someone picked the white cell, fine, whatever. Is it actually an accurate number? Probably not. However, on average, if you have a major depressive disorder, right, either bipolar or just depressive, your telomeres by definition are probably shorter than a normal person's.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
If you are on lithium for more than 2 years, your telomeres are statistically longer than a normal person's, which led people to look at this to say, well, is lithium actually increasing telomeres? Right? There are some studies that suggest that they do. There are some studies that suggest that they don't.
Okay.
But we do know that lithium increases the TERT aspect of telomerase. Okay. And not only does TERT act in telomerase, it also goes to your mitochondria to improve mitochondrial function.
Okay. We've got 2 wins.
We got 2 wins. We have one potential win, right? And one absolute win. Now, if you go backwards and you say, well, if you look at communities that have more lithium in the drinking water, there's all-cause morbidity and mortality is lower.
Huh.
Okay. Especially suicide, homicide, and violent crimes.
Interesting.
And that's just a little bit of lithium. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so we want, because lithium in large doses is not a good thing.
Right. So little bits is very helpful. The dose for bipolars and major depressive starts at 300 milligrams. And 300 and up is when you start seeing significant side effects.
Right.
Right. So if you want to get the benefits without the side effect, then the question is what's the dose?
How low do you go? Yeah.
The answer is we don't know. However, I decided that if you get medical grade lithium, all right, the slowest you can get is 300. It just is, because that's the lowest dose for
what it's approved for. Right? Yeah.
So I decided that a quarter of that would be an appropriate dose, not to treat an actual disease, but to be prophylactic in terms of aging.
Okay. So you would
basically happen to be a little happier. Fantastic. Right. The key, however, is that in the real studies, you had to be on it for longer than 2 years to see any benefit.
Interesting.
And presumably, if it's in the drinking water, it's a long-term,
very low dose.
Right. So I'm thinking medium to low, consistent.
Okay. So this is kind of like this is part of the panacea.
with not, no. This is like, no, but Panacea, no.
No.
But this is like, I've rated like 50 some agents, and this one, I haven't even rated it yet. This is like me experimenting.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys, if you're not familiar with Dr. Kaufmann's rating system, it's a thing of beauty. It's, what is it? Seven digits.
It's
And
seven.
each one refers to, like, does it have human studies? Is it, I mean, you could go through, you could probably rattle through it much faster than I can, because I'd have to go digging and remembering them. But
yeah, no. So the deal quickly is that instead of the hallmarks of aging, I use the 7 tenets because I think it's easier, and there are subcategories so that as we discover new things, they fit more neatly into the categories. So one is DNA alterations, which is telomeres, epigenetics, and chromosomal arrangement. 2 is mitochondria. 3 are pathways, which are your Sirtuins, AMP kinase, mTOR. 4 is quality control, so that's DNA repair mechanisms, proteostasis, and autophagy. 5 is your immune system and your inflammatory system. 6 is what I call individual cell needs, recognition of senescent cells versus stem cells versus liver cell versus kidney cell, et cetera. And then 7 is waste management, which is mostly glycation and then lipofuscin accumulation. And then I rate them, each one of those, on a 0 to 3 basis. So 0 means it does absolutely nothing in the category. 1 means there's evidence in a culture or test tube, something of that nature, something cellular based. 2 in any non-human model, rats, mostly rodents, etc., some pigs, cows, horses. And then 3 if there's significantly good evidence in humans. So every agent that I rate comes with a 7-digit system.
Cool. Is there such a thing as a 3-3-3-3-3-3-3?
There is no perfect one. The best ones are fisetin. Resveratrol is up there. NAD gets 3 3s. Most of them are scattered. There's some 3s and some 2s, which is why it's sort of a cumulative system. Like I add all the numbers up and then you sort of figure it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense. So then, so lithium would get a couple of 3s. Well, not even. Would it get a 3 in telomeres?
It's hard to say. I would get a 3 mitochondrial because we've done that. We know that upregulates TERT in people. Hard to say. Like I kind of didn't rate it for that very reason. There's too many question marks.
Interesting. So in any event, so 300 divided by 4, if one, or even maybe lower. Right? Because if we think about the people getting it in their drinking water, like, it's got to be minute.
Right. And some people take like 2 to 3 milligrams. That's possible. Get that on Amazon. I don't know if that would actually do anything.
Okay. Well,
I mean, it might. It very well might. I don't actually know.
Okay. Cool. Well, it's always good to know what we don't know and what we're exploring. Okay. So do we even want to touch on exosomes, or do we want to say farewell now?
I think we need to cut it because that's going to be a 15-minute discussion, and
that's going to be hard. Okay, well, that just means we're going to have to talk again, because exosomes, I think, it's its own
whole new world.
It's a whole new universe, right? So the good news is we've covered all kinds of things today. We now all know exactly what heat shock proteins are, their chaperones, and how we might use lithium and NAD, the ins and outs, SIRT1, 3, and 6. We learned some strange new things that you're diving into. And most exciting, we know now that you have a clinic coming down the pipes in the spring, March.
Yes,
hopefully.
I do. Yep.
That is truly exciting. Not to mention the fact it's going to be like walking into a candy store, right? Because there'll be the Kaufmann line of supplements, and it'll be, how will anybody know what to buy? That'll be the trick. But
I'm sure I can help people figure that out.
I think you can. I think that's kind of how you roll and what you do. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time today. You never fail to deliver crazy content. So I appreciate it, because I know you came screaming in from work and now you've got to scream out to something else. I look forward to catching up with you in a couple of weeks, and also to a follow-up episode when you open your clinic.
That sounds perfect. Game on.
All right. Well, why don't we tell people where they can find you and follow you so that they too find out they don't have to wait for me to tell them when and where the clinic is.
Yeah, great. So my website is kaufmannprotocol.com. Most information will be there. Book links and that sort of thing are there. And explanations of sort of the basic stuff that I talk about is usually there. And then most postings go on the Instagram, which is Kaufmann Anti-Aging. So very simple stuff.
Okay. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. And I will say, guys, if you're not aware of Dr. Kaufmann's work and you haven't read her books, if you're into this kind of stuff and you just want to dive deep into really cool stuff, you've got to check out the Kaufmann Protocol. I think that's 1 and 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 different books, so many things to dive into. So thank you so much again. And it's a pleasure as always.
As always.
Thank you.